Today we're going to talk in detail about how to handle seasonality and when times are tough, special strategies and top-down strategies to make your business run smoother and to make it more resilient. And we're going to lean into some of the stuff we spoke about in previous videos when it comes to commerce being everywhere, how to handle all these different kind of scenarios of those places where commerce takes place being everywhere. We're going to talk about different scenarios where you can handle ups and downs with e-commerce when it happens anywhere rather than just on your website. So thanks for joining Everywhere Commerce. My name's Tate Pollock, founder of Pivotal and author of Everywhere Commerce. And today we're going to talk about how modern commerce actually works and how you can build, scale and lead in a world where commerce happens everywhere. I also want to promote the book Everywhere Commerce, which you can buy on Amazon and Waterstones. You can also get it on Pivotal at the website. That's pivotal.digital/everywhere-commerce. So grab your copy today and let me know what you think. I'm using some new recording software. I've got 2 cameras on the go at the moment, and I've changed my lighting in my rig a little bit, so hopefully this works out better. I'm trying to improve the quality in every video, so hopefully 2 angles will help you get a better view of what I'm trying to say, help me get my body language out a bit more, and also I can possibly cut up some different views and things for social media, which, you know, of course is relevant to me because I'm in marketing. Today we're going to talk about smart planning for businesses before we move on to the next part of the book, which is chapter 2 on branding. But before we move on to the next chapter, which is building a scalable business. So we talk about in the next chapter, insourcing, outsourcing, generally resourcing your business. So to summarize on this strategy session, we're going to talk about smart planning for business. So we talked a little bit before about listening. We talked before about unique selling propositions. And now we're going to talk about how to ride out peaks and troughs. We talked a bit before about seasonality, which feeds quite nicely into this. So all businesses experience peaks and troughs, and also businesses can experience what we call feast and famine. So the old saying goes, you want to make hay when the sun shines. When it's not shining, you still have to be at work, you still have to get shit done. So there's a few ways which we can cope with peaks and troughs in business and making your brand more resilient. Every business needs money throughout the year, and so there are different strategies to make sure you have enough money. It's not just about how much money you get in or spend, it's also about cash flow. So if money is the blood of the business entity, then cash flow is the circulation. So I like to often use biological processes in analogies and metaphors for business and everything we do, because I think that everything we do is a reflection of what we're made up of, which is biology. We have muscles in business, we have bones in business, we have brains in business and hearts. So yeah, sometimes you'll find me running metaphors to bodies. And I think if you have a healthy business and a healthy mind in business, you're likely to also be running that biologically the same as well. They're interlinked. So the first thing I want to talk about is keeping your money in check. Now, I've not really been the best money saver over my lifetime so far, but I've always been a good money maker. And success only came when I started to surround myself with people who were very good at money saving to compensate for my lack of money saving myself. So I can make it, but as soon as I started to make it and take myself away from being able to spend it and put other people in charge of that, or technically I could override that, but once you put someone in charge of something and give them ownership, it's much easier then to let them handle that side of things. So just that alone, make your second hire. If you're like me and you're kind of a visionary and you just want to jump at things and seize opportunities, then you might want to find yourself someone who's practical, kind of logical, sees things for what they really are, doesn't get too sidetracked or blindsided by the next biggest opportunity, to counteract or counterbalance that wanting to just jump at every opportunity. And the thing is, if you're enthusiastic enough and you've hired that person or you've brought that person on as, say, a business partner, then that person is going to eventually have a threshold when your enthusiasm is that high, they're going to jump on board. So they become a filter for whether or not your random ideas become successful, and you're less likely to just spend. So that's a really good piece of advice, keeping your money in check by having someone in your team who's able to counteract your spending habits. If you have them, you might be really sensible, in which case possibly you don't spend enough. And then you might want to add someone who's a bit more possibly ADHD, possibly a bit more visionary, possibly with lots of ideas and wanting to jump at things. And you can become that ballast for them and keep their feet on the ground and make sure their head's in the clouds. You need both though. You need a yin and a yang in cash flow and managing a business. A business will stagnate if it doesn't have one or the other, and it will just die. They're completely interdependent. So you need those two things. Some people have both, but become very rare. Each of those characters are very rare. So to get one person who's got both of those things in equal measure is very rare. And also you don't want them in equal measure. Some people wax and wane, and you need that waxing and waning. So that's often why you get two people that successfully start businesses together. Steve Jobs and Wozniak, for example. You need the sensible one and you need the visionary one. So that person will cut unnecessary costs and be sympathetic when they recognize an opportunity to. The other really important thing to do and to keep in mind of is to not overspend during busy times. So when you're in a really busy state and your business is doing really well, you might find that in that enthusiasm and riding on that high, you're likely to spend more money. So that's when to save. So you might not need to spend as much as you think, but in that reactive state, because business is booming, you feel less worried. You see the bank account starting to grow, you feel less worried. You're more likely to take risks with your cash flow. So the best thing at that point is to hold back and spend what you need to, or if you need to, also refer to either a set of rules that you've laid out for yourself and be disciplined, or use the other person that you've hired or brought in as a business partner and help them, give them the keys to whether or not you spend or not, and tell them during busy times we don't want to spend. So set rules for yourself in advance. Bit like when you're trying to lean up, don't put the opportunity to spend right in front of you. Make sure that in order to spend, you have to go through a bit of a process, and that will make it less likely that you spend. The equivalent when leaning up body-wise would be make the decision in the supermarket to not bring crap into the house, and then you're not going to eat it. Manage your cash flow that way. I think making accurate financial forecasts, so trying to plan a map out of what you're likely to get in across the month or the season that you're in, understanding your peak periods. Tricky if you haven't traded for a year, but once you've traded for a year with similar products and services, you'll know roughly what the next year will look like. And then it's important to look back. Even if the numbers are completely out, you'll see similar rises and falls, or peaks and troughs in the data of sales, number of sales, revenue, that kind of thing. So you want to make sure that you're planning ahead based on previous data wherever possible, just so that you have an idea of what's to come. And when you know a slow time is coming, when you know that it's about to get a bit quieter, I think it's also really important to just hold back a bit more too. So know that you're likely to have to spend and not receive as much during those times. Your overheads will probably stay quite similar. You can pull back on certain things. So for example, something we do sometimes with our clients at Pivotal is we will work on a bigger budget, and we'll work to larger campaigns for our clients during peak season, and then we'll scale things back in terms of budget and even our time and what we bill during quieter periods. Make sure they can keep affording to keep the lights on. And I think the other thing is to always stay vigilant. So as soon as you become too comfortable or things are going too well, you become complacent. Perhaps you don't save as much. Perhaps you're not thinking about the future as much. Always keep a nest egg. Always keep an amount aside for a rainy day, because businesses tend to grow fat on them when times are good, and they need to lean up when times are bad. And if you don't have any fat financially, it's very difficult to lean up at that point. It's important to make sure you have some cash in reserve, whether it's from investment in the early days or just a savings from later on in business and mid-stage cycle to later. And then make sure you have enough to run your business for a few months with barely any income. That's really important. And it provides security enough for you to make decisions of a slightly higher risk, and that's where all the opportunities are. So by making sure you've got enough money and you feel financially comfortable, allows you to have the freedom to take the risks you need in order to grow a successful business. So it's definitely a last resort, and I would hate to want to do it myself, but sometimes it has to be done. So just have something ready in place to borrow in an emergency. So be ready to borrow in emergencies. It's not ideal, but have a facility in place in case you need it, because a limited company is a limited liability. If you have a few years trading, it will have its own credit, and it's possible to grab a line of credit if you need it in order to pull yourself out of a dip, as long as you have a plan. And that doesn't necessarily need to affect you personally. If you don't have personal guarantors or guarantees against your business, it itself can have a line of credit. And you definitely should have one in place if you've got a viable business that just hits a tough time. Say a client doesn't pay, or perhaps a supplier doesn't deliver the goods that you need in time, and you paid for them already but they never arrived. All kinds of scenarios can happen, and you want to be able to reach into a line of credit to save the day. If you've got a good business, don't let it go to waste because you haven't set up something as a security blanket for an emergency. So that can come in the form of credit cards, it can come in the form of bank loans, angel investment, just money in your savings which you've put there from another source. Perhaps you've got personal savings which could be put into the business and you have them at the ready. Just some kind of emergency fund. But I don't recommend the last one. If you can get funds from another source last minute, then you don't need to personally be liable for an emergency within your other entity. Remember, a business entity is not you, and although you feel like it's you, if you've incorporated and have a limited company, it's a separate entity that carries its own risks for a large amount of that. So there are linked risks, but it's called a limited liability company for a reason. You can talk to a financial advisor as well to find a good source of emergency income if you need it. A lot of them have good rates and are able to access credit much easier than you because they have brokerage portals, and they're able to reach into their wider network and find people who can specifically help you with your industry. So find a good financial advisor. Good accountants will often be able to point you in the right direction too. So speak to your accountant. Make sure you compare rates. Make sure you compare all the fors and against with each of those emergency backups, because that can make the difference between successfully using your emergency fund and not. So the next one is stock up. Just stock up, get more inventory in, or have the ability to roll out inventory at a lower price. If you're a service-based business, what that means is get freelancers at the ready, because hours, if you're a service-based business, is your inventory, and if you're a products-based business, products are your inventory. If it's virtual, well, products are infinite, so you've got a good business model there. And if you're a SaaS product, then you've got infinite potential of your product there too. But if you're selling products or services and you've got a finite amount of those, then the way to fix that is, if you're a service-based business, find a good price freelancer. I recommend 2 tiers. So a local, great price freelancer who can support you at the drop of a hat, someone you can reach into your phone and meet them the next day or the same day. And then the next thing I recommend is an overseas freelancer, or a company that offers the same service for you overseas. So at Pivotal, we've evolved and naturally grown really strong connections with Gujarat in India, and our senior solutions architect here at Pivotal, his brother is the CEO of a company in India that we work really closely with, and actually it's starting to form into what we're going to be calling Pivotal India, which is really cool. So we'll have an office, we'll be not headquartered, but our Indian overseas team will be headquartered in Gujarat in India. It'll be branded up, and Pranay will be running that as the CEO, is the plan, which is Ankit's brother. And Ankit is working here at Pivotal, and we've got the perfect communications layer in place in order to make sure we can hire really efficiently in Gujarat all the resources that we need. But we also have really great freelancers locally at Pivotal. So if I hit a resourcing emergency, say a client has a project due or there's a specific campaign that needs to be met, then I have 2 people go off sick who are the only people who can do that. I have local freelancers. And if those local freelancers aren't available or aren't able to reach into their network, or their bandwidth isn't available, I've got Gujarat and I've got Indian resource also. Beyond that, I've got additional resources too. So I've got Ukrainian freelancers, freelancers in America, freelancers in Switzerland. So the wider your network, the stronger you are. It's cheesy, but that phrase, network is net worth, is definitely true. It's a good phrase. Cheesy, but good. If you're talking about products, on the other hand, well, the way to fix that is just have a decent sized warehouse. Perhaps if you have a loft at home, or you have additional storage in the form of garages, or you can have a space in a 3PL for a good price, or you've got your own warehouse with plenty of room. Buy additional inventory, as long as it's not going to go off or have a sell by date, as long as it stays relevant and it's not a trending product. Stock up, make sure you've got enough for if you run out, or if your competitors run out and you're going to become the only source of that. That stocking up and you being the only source means you can then elevate your prices when you have the stock and they don't, and that demand is going to mean that you can meet it at the higher price and you're going to make a lot of money. So not only is it great for emergencies or when times are tough, but if you can increase your inventory of popular products when times are good, you're even more likely to be in high demand as your competitors sell out and you've got more products. So I don't recommend offering huge discounts as a general rule unless you are a discount brand, and we'll talk more about that later. But in the short term, if you need to make more sales, then the easy option is to offer discounts or special deals. I say special deals because the word discount implies that the brand is selling products that aren't as good. And actually a special deal, slight change in language, implies that the product is just as good and you're giving them a special deal. And then it's more of an equal transaction between two people, or between two. Well, one person doesn't have the upper hand in that situation. They're just getting granted a favor. It's a very subtle but important difference. So experiment with different offers, special deals, offers. Those are good words to use. Again, don't use discount if you can help it. Offers such as buy one get one free is much better than get one half price, or buy one get one half price, or 50% off. So buy one get one free is very similar to 50% off because you have two, and at the end of the day, and one of them was free, meaning you have 50% off. But if you just offer 50% off, well, you've only sold one product and you've only covered half of the cost of that, which is likely to be eating into your margin. So your average order value, or your order value for that, is lower and you've made less profit. Buy one get one free is a very similar feeling, although it feels like you're getting something extra rather than discounting down the product. It's still the equivalent of 50% off, but you've sold more, which means you've got more profit to work with. And so that's an offer or a special deal which will work. Be prepared with those kind of things in your arsenal when it comes to quieter periods, and then you're going to see more customers buying through you versus your competition. If your competition are prone to doing those kind of things, see if you can make it extra special in some way. See if you can add some kind of extra value through unique selling propositions and through resonating with your audience a bit more, like we talked about earlier in previous video. So when you're running your special deals or your offers in order to bring up sales volumes and increase revenues during quieter times, make sure you're testing. So you want to test two offers against each other. You want to look at your KPIs we spoke about before, and we want to make sure that if you have goals of additional revenue, that you're meeting that at that height when you're running one special offer versus another. Look at them incrementally. Try and keep the end goal the same. So if you're going to sell a product like widget 1 or widget 2, run the same product against different offers rather than different products against the same offer. Once you've managed to isolate which offers work best with your business and which ones resonate best with your audience and your customer base, then you've got those in your arsenal to run next time when things get a bit quieter. And you really want to focus on average order value. So when you're running your special offers, make sure it's in pride of place, and make sure that your offers are geared towards boosting the amount of products and the higher order volume of your products in their baskets if you're selling online. If you're in marketplaces, kind of trickier because you're selling product by product, but you can offer volume discounts which can be reflected on the platform. So if you're on Amazon and you've got deals where if they buy 5 they get a percentage off, if they buy 10 they get a greater percentage off, make sure you're capitalizing on bulk volume they are discounts, and marketplaces are a place for discounts. So just make sure that your model can absorb anything like that. When it comes to quieter times and you need to get more money in, be geared up with those kind of things in your back pocket. And sometimes selling more at a lower price rather than selling less at a higher price is a good idea. So sometimes a way to battle the competition is by getting a better deal from your supplier. And to get a better deal from your supplier, often if you order more from them, you can negotiate a better price upstream. And that means that lower price that you're selling for actually is the same as your competition who's selling at a slightly higher price in terms of profit margin, because you've got a better deal in getting the product in the first place. So have a think too, because it's not just about what goes out and what it goes out for price wise, it's about how it comes in and the price you get it for. So the next thing is you want to keep your customers interested. So people can be fickle, like there's so many choices out there and things trend in one way or another. And sometimes things are more popular because of weather, or they're more popular because someone famous is talking about it or got found with it or whatever. So with that fickle nature of people, you've got to make sure that you can keep your customers interested. To do that, you have to make sure that your customers have you at the forefront of their mind. And to make people constantly think about you, you have to resonate with them on an emotional level. So one, you have to always be available in their eye line, and that's like not necessarily to be taken literally, but you need to be in their inbox on a regular basis. You need to be in their text messages on a regular basis. You need to be potentially speaking to them on the phone on a regular basis. You need to be on TV if they're watching TV on a regular basis. If they're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, this YouTube channel, for example, will probably have adverts on it. You need to be in those adverts. If you're on LinkedIn, if your customers are on LinkedIn, you need to be there on a regular basis and in all those places so that they think about you all the time. And then when they're looking to get the product that you sell, you need to be the first brand that pops up into their head as soon as they're making that buying decision. Another thing you can do in order to stay at forefront of mind when a customer is looking to buy your product is to be sticky. So it's all well and good being regularly present, but if they're getting kind of a blindness to that regular presence, what can you do to hook into their emotions and make them remember you? So be sticky. And one thing you can do to be sticky is, well, if everyone's selling the same product, what makes your offer different? If you can offer exclusivity, make people feel unique, make sure that the offer is scarce and rare and only for them, even if it is for a bunch of people, make sure they feel like it's only for them. And make sure it feels urgent as well, because people remember things that are urgent. If something can be put off till later, even if it's a really good deal and it's infinitely available, why don't they buy it next year instead of now? If people have to buy it soon and it's rare, well, they'll take advantage of that, because that triggers the opportunity side of people, which is, I think primal and there as part of our hunting and gathering instincts. And then finally, when it comes to keeping people interested, it's not just about keeping them interested. It's about getting them ready to be interested in the future. So it's about grabbing them when you have their attention, but perhaps post-purchase or after you've delivered the service. And rather than just saying, bye, thank you, have a nice day, it's about saying, by the way, next week we're going to be offering this. In 2 months, if you come back, this is something you can have. If you come back for this service, when you're ready, I'll give you this deal. And then say, bye, thank you, have a nice day. That little tiny post-sales or post-service delivery messaging can make a huge difference when it comes to decision making for the customer or your client later on down the line. So I recommend just making sure you prep people and build a bit of anticipation for what's to come. They'll start to be sticky themselves. They'll start to check you out and see what else you might have on offer. So we go back to seasonality quite a lot, because we're in a world where seasons are a regular thing. If you're in a country with 2 seasons or 1 season, that's fine. It's easier to manage marketing, messaging, branding around that one demographic. But a lot of places, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, have 4 seasons, and seasonality is a big thing. Even in places where the weather's, we say seasonality broadly, because even in places where the weather is, like California or LA, the same all year bar 2 days, you still have seasons in a sense, because you've got Christmas, where people are going to get festive even if it's sunny. You've got Easter, you've got St. Patrick's Day, especially like in New York. and Ireland, obviously. Seasonality is not just about the weather and the time of year, it's about the festivities. So you got to change your marketing with the seasons. So we talk about that in the book, and it's important to resonate with how people are feeling. So if people are feeling Christmassy and they hit your site and it doesn't feel Christmassy, but you're still pushing the same things you pushed before the rest of the world became festive, they'll feel less like you, and people who feel less like something are less likely to want to click or engage with it. So by being festive, looking into the human nature side of things, you're able to resonate far easier and click and gel far easier with people who are visiting your site, because if they're also feeling festive. It might be that your demographic is a non-festive type of demographic on average. Say, for example, just at a guess, you're selling PC parts. This is a very big generalization, but it might be that gaming PC components, the customers and the demographic of that, just at a guess, may not be as into the idea of Santa selling them that as maybe if you were selling home goods, where people might have kids and they're buying home goods, and the idea of Santa will make them feel excited because they know their kids are coming. So think about the demographic of who's buying. Maybe speak to some of them. Maybe you are one, and I'll recommend that later, being your own customer. But if you aren't your own customer already and you don't understand your demographic intimately, then go find out what resonates with them and who they are, and find out how festivities will work for them, and try and make sure that your site is messaging and communicating in a way where festivities line up, because it's not so much about the products. Then the products might be the same, and if someone is really into Christmas and really into Santa, and there's two websites and they have two websites to choose from, one that makes them smile will be the one that they choose if the prices are the same and nothing else is different. But make sure you keep it on brand, and if you're going to be festive, make sure you don't sacrifice your brand and your unique selling propositions and what makes you different. Make sure you are festive on brand with what you communicate as a whole. Don't sell out, just capitalize on festivities. And on that basis, you can also update keywords. So you can update your product titles, or perhaps create new product titles, because changing your product titles on a regular basis might be bad for SEO. But you can have Christmas related equivalent product titles for SEO. And we're not talking about search engine optimization in this world. As Neil Patel puts it, we're talking about search everywhere optimization. Big up Neil Patel. Well, a very good example. Instead of selling a jumper, sell a Christmas jumper. You might have to change your product, or it might look kind of Christmassy, but if you just add a couple of keywords and make it Christmassy or make it relevant to the season, people search differently. Their buying behavior is different during those festive periods. And it's the same with your marketing messaging and like the graphics and the creatives that you put together. So, even if you don't change your website, change your creatives on Meta, change your creatives on Instagram and Facebook. Make sure your messaging is a bit more fun and jolly, or perhaps lovey-dovey during Valentine's Day, or people like Easter egg hunts on websites and throughout social media, and just to be a bit more engaged when it comes to holidays. Like Richard Branson says, business is a lesson in problem solving, and you have to become a really good problem solver. New business owners tend to make the mistake of relaxing when times are good. Don't really ever relax. Make time to relax on the weekend, but when it comes to business, maybe the better word is stay vigilant, and don't just think that things are easy, and stop keeping your eye on the ball. When you're switched on and you're at work and you're running your business and things are good, turn your attention to something which is going to protect you and make you more resilient when times are bad. Don't just switch off and go, well, I don't need to work as much now. Especially new business owners and people in situations where they've got high levels of accountability. It's your responsibility to make sure you make the right choices in those good times. And during slow times, it's not the time to hide away if things aren't going well. That's the time to double down on understanding. We spoke about that before as well, and listening. Understanding your customers even more, because perhaps they're not on your website or in the place where you're selling your product or service, but they are doing something, and they are probably buying from someone else something else. And perhaps you can modify your business model a little bit and make it so that during those quieter times, you're able to cater for their needs in another way. So, and that would protect your business and make it more resilient too. So this next thing comes down to work ethic. So it's silly, but it's in the book, and I'm gonna talk about it. So some people say working hard is the right way to go about things, and some people say no, work smart. Well, I say work smart because one, it's a silly word and you'll probably remember it, but also you need to do both. You need to work smart and hard, and it's definitely, your competition is probably doing one or the other and sitting back on that phrase, work smart, not hard. But you absolutely need to do both, and that's the only thing that will give you the edge on your competition, is you outwork them in both efficiency and duration. Like it's two kinds of race. It's a strength competition and it's an endurance competition. And unless you're willing to really put in the grind and you're willing to make sacrifices, you're going to fall foul against people who are willing to make those sacrifices and put in the grind. There's so many people out there trying to do similar things. You can have the best unique selling proposition in the world. Unless you've invented something which is like Velcro or the Post-it note, then, and by the way, I really want to interview that person in my Pivotal Moments podcast. So I'm working on that. He's an old boy, but he's still going. Unless you've done something which is actually going to change the world, you've got to work pretty hard, because there are a lot of other people trying to do the same thing you're doing. So, if you're super creative and you invent something, then props. You've got a window of opportunity. So grow your business there too. But the same rules apply. It just means you might have a window of opportunity where you're selling based on novelty or usefulness before lots of people saturate the market with the same thing and you get copycats and whatnot. So I'm going to share some stats with you. This statistic comes from the New York Enterprise Report. About a third of founders work 50 hours a week. 25% of founders work at least 60 hours a week. And I would say it probably scales upwards. So 10% of founders probably working 70 hours a week plus. I know that in my early days, I barely slept. And it wasn't because I was trying to work hard. It was because I was that in love with what I was doing, that passionate about seeing the results, that excited about waking up the next morning. I just couldn't sleep. So it wasn't forced. It wasn't a hard thing for me to do. It happened naturally. And if you're not that way inclined, it is hard to start a business. If you're not really passionate and enthusiastic about your outcomes and what you're doing, and you love what you do, it's much harder to run an endurance race that way. So I pick something that you love, or that really hits home with you and you enjoy getting up and you're excited about how you can tackle it. Without that, you have to have some pretty good mental resilience. So love what you do. And if you love what you do, then those extra hours of hard work, well, yes, they're work, yes, they might be hard, but at least you're enjoying yourself. So in theory, you're kind of getting 60 hours a week of fun, or, more. So it might be tiring, but at least you go home with a smile on your face. And here's another statistic. So according to On Deck, early stage entrepreneurs and business owners take no holidays at all, especially in the early years. So if you're going to run a successful business, that doesn't mean you can't have a holiday, but it does mean that you probably will sacrifice some of those luxuries, like having a holiday now and in the early years. But you probably can save a lot of money and time later as you build out your business and your operational structure. You'll be able to take a 6-month holiday in 5-10 years time if your business is strong enough to handle your doing that. And you can also work from a beach. Remember, you can run your business that you enjoy from a beach with a margarita. Nothing's stopping you doing that. You don't have to be in an office the whole time. If it's your business, just be ready to solve any problems. As the business owner or founder, if that's probably my demographic here watching this, just be on point and be on call, ready to fix things, and you could be anywhere in the world, unless it's an in-person thing, in which case you need to hire a very good manager who you can help and coach. So the difference between working smart is and working hard is, smart means you're going to look for shortcuts all the time, you're going to look for efficiencies all the time, and if something that takes you 3 hours can be taking 1 hour, then you'll make that change to what you do to achieve that outcome, and you'll do it in 1 hour, provided the quality is the same, and you'll then use those other 2 hours to do something else. And you start compressing the time it takes for you to achieve the same output, and increasing the efficiency of the overall business by working smart to create shortcuts and hard to make sure that you're working at maximum velocity and you're outputting as much as you possibly can. Sometimes the only difference between you and your competition succeeding or not is the willingness to outwork your competition. That's really important. Just a final reiteration of that. The next thing I want to talk about when it comes to important strategic decisions and running your business in a way where you can grow it and scale it is delegation. Business owners, founders, people who grew something from the ground up and are used to being able to solve everything themselves, me included, are the worst at letting go, the worst at delegating, because it's easier to do something yourself than to explain in the same amount of time it takes to do that thing to someone else who's probably not going to do it as efficiently as you. And so for that reason, many business owners and founders never delegate, and they just do it themselves because it's easier. And that's true to a certain extent, especially when you need to run lean. But as soon as you're able to run slightly less lean, once you can let go of your ego and understand that someone might do something less effectively than you to begin with as they're learning and training. And if you haven't got the budget to hire a specialist, they almost certainly will do it less effectively than you. But they will get better at it over the time. And if you give them a narrower window of things that they need to do for their job and to satisfy their job role, they'll get better and better until eventually they're better than you. But unless you're willing to let your business kind of strategically slip in a little way in order to let someone else take on that challenge and then get better, you're never going to be able to grow in your bandwidth, and you need to be taking off hats and giving them to other people to wear on a regular basis, or you're going to be the bottleneck. You're going to stop your business getting to where it needs to get to. You're never going to go on a holiday, and you're always going to be working 60, 70 hours a week. So you have to be willing to kind of put your ego aside and delegate and accept that, yes, it's going to take slightly longer for you to coach that person to do that thing. And yes, they'll probably do it less effectively, but eventually they won't. And eventually you'll never have to worry about that thing again. So learn to delegate. So a study by the Alternative Board found that 30% of business owners think they're more capable than their employees. 20% doubt their employees' capability and their skills. And 20% want it done fast, so they just want to do it themselves. And 19% just enjoy doing the tasks. So if you enjoy doing the task, you think it's quicker to do it yourself, you think you're more capable, and you think your employees' skills aren't there, only logical thing is for you to do it yourself, but you have to override that. Going solo has limits, and you've got between, 12 and maybe 16 waking hours in a day, depending on, more like 16 hours, possibly more. I've definitely survived on 20 hours consistently awake in the day, working and doing things, but you're limited basically. And as soon as you start being able to bring people along on the journey with you, you become unlimited. And the other thing you can do is you can encourage your team members to work smart and hard too, just like you, and take ownership, whether it's through giving them a real, actual ownership in something, or at least you're giving them a sense of ownership, and that comes from giving responsibility. And if they know they can fuck up with something and they need to do it well, trust me, people, as long as you've hired the right people, someone with a good conscience, they probably will look after that task and make sure it's done well. And they'll know that whatever you're paying them is going to disappear as soon as they don't. So, you can trust people and trust them until they prove to you that you can't trust them. You can't run a business or grow anything or bring people in any journey if you start from a place of distrust. And this is really important. The right people will turn your business into a powerhouse, and the wrong people will just create roadblocks and make themselves look busy. So you have to be really careful when choosing people and choosing who to delegate to. Have methods for trial shifts. Get them to prove themselves a little bit. Use your gut feeling a fair amount. And another really useful thing to remember is when you're hiring or finding someone to work with you on something, you can teach skills, but you can't teach enthusiasm. You can't teach an attitude. So if you hire an attitude and the person is adept, they've got full control of the English language and they can do basic maths, but their attitude is good, they're a much better hire than someone with all the skills in the world with a bad attitude. Most important bit of advice I can give you on delegation is find people with good attitudes who are adept, whether they know the skill or not, and a willingness to learn. They're enthusiastic and they want to help. That person every time. Even if it takes twice as long to train them, once they're trained, they're going to be an asset that will bear fruit for a very long time, and your business is going to grow. So when is it time to expand? I'll go into this. This is an important one. So when you start a business, it's not time to expand, not straight away. There are key points to look for in your day-to-day when it's time to expand, and that is, well, the first one is when you have to start turning down work or refusing to sell customers products. You either need to buy more products, or if you're a service-based business, you need to put more inventory in your stockroom, which is the hours that you have in the day. That means you have to expand your inventory of hours available to deliver your service. So if you offer, say, accountancy or law, or say you're a designer, or you run an agency like me, you need to have more hours available in your team if you're starting to turn down work, but not straight away. First of all, you want to flex into freelancers, and you want to flex into whatever resources you have in order to prove that consistently you're having to turn down work. If you turn down work once and you think I need a new hire, and then you don't need to turn down work anymore, and you've over-resourced that area, you're going to be in a problem, you're going to be in a debt. So you want to be consistently using freelancers at slightly less profit and prove that you need that extra resource before you then go and hire into that resource and add a new salary to your bottom line. That's super important. If you've got steady revenue streams in your business and you're looking to add new revenue streams, and you're relied upon and your current team is being relied upon to service your current revenue streams, then you can consider doing a hire or delegating to freelancers, or working with perhaps a company outsourced and abroad if you need to create a new revenue stream separate and parallel to the one that draws most of your business. And the reason for that is you don't want to dilute focus. Focus is the most important currency in a business, and where you put your focus is what's going to grow. So the reason to delegate for a new revenue stream is, rather than take your eye off the ball, you can, for a minute, while the rest of your team keeps their eyes on the ball, create a new operational process or something which is going to start yielding new income streams. Put someone else's eye on that ball and step back. Then you can pay attention to both revenue streams, and you know someone's taking ownership of each. But it's really just creating a hierarchy and a tree of ownership, not just a tree of people that do things. The ownership element is the most important. Another really important factor when considering whether you should increase your team size is if your customer complaints are going up. If your product is the same, if your service is the same, and you're not facilitating it to a level where your customer service is making your customers or clients happy, it might well be a bandwidth issue, and they might not be getting communicated with regularly enough. So it might be a good idea to then hire someone or use a freelancer, or perhaps a BPO, like a business process outsourcing company, which you can find abroad at a good price, and locally too. Find a freelancer or someone with the ability or bandwidth at a good price to help improve your communication with your clients and customers. That's a good time. If you notice that your complaints are going up and your business has stayed the same, you're probably starting to see strain. You want to see it consistently though, so don't do it as soon as you get one complaint. Get a bunch of complaints over a period of time, not forever because you'll ruin your reputation, but over maybe 3-4 weeks. Check that it's not seasonal, because you might be in a seasonal rush, in which case you want to use some freelance or kind of flexible resources to improve on your communication. Or if it's year round and you see that there's a trend that year round your communication needs to be improved in order to reduce customer complaints, then you can do a hire internally at that point. But just use that as a trigger or a dial to recognize when you do need to expand on your resources. More customer complaints, more criticism from your client base. It's a good point of action. And this is one I'm very guilty of. So if you start to neglect your admin duties, so say for example you're not submitting your accounts on time, or you're not looking at your data enough, which is an admin duty. You're not answering emails on time, or you're not having one-to-ones with your team, depending on the size of your team, or you're not getting out there and meeting clients anymore. Your business will slowly start to suffer, and you won't realize it. But if you recognize your admin duties are starting to slip, the day-to-day things that you should be doing, you put aside. A lot of that stuff's really important, and it makes a big difference over time. You don't notice the day-to-day, but in 3 months, if you neglected your admin duties, you're going to notice it. So make sure you've got people in place there too, operationally and kind of administratively, to help backfill the stuff that you're starting to neglect, because your attention is all over the place, because it will be. I've covered off some of the basics of looking after a business and creating a more resilient business during tougher times. And in previous episodes, we talked about unique selling propositions. So we've kind of brought some of that in, and that seasonality, we've brought some of that in. We've talked about things to look out for. That kind of falls under what we talked about in the last episode, which was about listening. We talked a lot about listening. Again, listening applies to everything, like understanding before you take action. We talked about those trigger points, and when it comes time to scale up your business, it's about listening and understanding the true nature of things before moving on to those next steps or actions. So you have to understand, not just follow instructions. You have to be working with everything in sync. So in the next episode, we're going to talk more about the nuances of insourcing, outsourcing, and generally resourcing, and going into detail about that. We're going to talk about the benefits of hiring in-house and how hiring in-house can be a benefit, but also the downsides of it, and when to go for it and when to wait. We're going to go into some detail about that. We're going to talk about outsourcing. We're going to talk about the advantages of outsourcing, such as faster starting points and being able to access a talent pool from around the world. And there is a very big talent pool out there, which probably isn't in your local area. Possibly some people, but across the world you can access so much talent, and normally for a good price, and how that you can use outsourcing to scale at an early stage in your business. We're going to talk about the challenges of outsourcing. There's a lot of challenges, everything from language barriers to tools, internet connection, setup, things which would get in the way of an otherwise great resource overseas and getting them set up to work with you and to deliver. And also the dangers of not having someone with long-term buy-in, which can come from outsourcing too, and how there are some ways to overcome that. We're going to talk about overall strategy when it comes to properly utilizing both in-housing and outsourcing. And that's before we go into the next chapter, which will be a follow-on from that episode, the following one, which will go into even more detail about it and kind of get a little bit more scientific about in-housing and outsourcing. And there are other types of in-housing, outsourcing too. So we're going to talk about ladder steps in this next episode, like strategies to improve your outsourcing. We're going to talk about making sure we start with our weaker areas. We're going to talk about how to communicate with people that we're outsourcing to get the most efficiency. And we're going to talk about how we can anticipate communications issues and get out in front of that, so we avoid breaking deadlines and causing issues with our stream and our operations, and how to find the right people. I've been through hundreds of freelancers myself, and my team even more so. And this is from, over the course of 20 years, I found some amazing freelancers and I found some terrible freelancers, and they've, impacted my reputation in the short term when I've worked with bad ones. So I'm going to give you as many tips as I can on how to find the best freelancers, and they're not what you think. We're going to touch on how to onboard them and how to make sure that everything that you give them is secure, how to interview them and make sure that they're going to start when you want them to start and work for the price you want them to work for, and there's no surprises. And we're going to talk about what to keep back. So what you don't want to outsource and what you don't want to give to freelancers, things that are important that you do as a final touch point, because it's not all about outsourcing. It's about knowing when to keep a hold of something too. We talk a lot about letting go, but it's about also knowing what to keep. It's both sides of the coin. It's yin and yang. If any of the things we've talked about today resonate with you, or you have any feedback, or perhaps you disagree with me on some of those points, or maybe I didn't make enough sense in some of those areas, then if you can put in the comments your thoughts and let me know what you think, I'd be really grateful. If you can like and subscribe to the channel, I'm trying to get more subscribers. This is a new thing for me, and I'm trying to work out what makes the algorithm show me to more people. But I think liking and subscribing and commenting are definitely in there. So do say something, to say hi if you want. Let me know who you are, where you're from, what part of the world you're in. And if you have any questions, I'm going to start tabling questions that people put in comments on videos in next videos. And eventually, when there's enough, I'll have a section just to answer those questions and those comments. So if you put in some comments and say, what do I do in this circumstance? Or perhaps we're talking about outsourcing and you've come up against something and you want some advice, I'll have a Q&A at the end, and I'll go through them and bring them up, and I'll start talking about them. And eventually maybe I'll do some lives and some streams and things like that. Do comment. Come back for the next episode. You've been watching Everywhere Commerce, which is the name of the book. Everywhere Commerce, or e-commerce, a pivotal redefinition of e-strategy. So pick up your copy from Amazon, from Waterstones, or from pivotal.digital/everywhere-commerce. And I'll see you in the next episode.